Hello and welcome to Breaking Money Silence, a podcast series dedicated to helping us all talk more openly about money. Each show features a special guest, some of them, like today, which I've handpicked, who will share with you one of their favorite money myths. Then together we will discuss how to bust this myth wide open. My name is Kathleen Kingsbury, and I am your host. My company, KBK Wealth Connection, is committed to helping women, couples, families, and their financial teams shatter money taboos and learn how to effectively talk about money. It's an honor today to have Sheri Fitts of Fitts Marketing, or the Shoe Fitts Marketing, hopefully I'll get that right, join us today. I'm going to let Sheri tell you a little bit about her experience. But let me just first say that I met Sheri about a year and a half ago when she started her own podcast. And I remember thinking, wow, this is a cool concept. And that was a lot of fun. Maybe I'll give it a try. So I'm happy to have Sheri as one of my newest guests to this new podcast as a result. But in general, just know that Sheri is a financial industry influencer. She's a popular social media speaker, and she is a creative force in the financial services area, specializing in marketing. Apparently, it all started when she was a young kid, that she has been an entrepreneur and marketer for a very long time. But today, she runs Shoe Fitts educational programs and offers a variety of different marketing packages and speaking engagements. She has over 25 years of experience in the industry, and she does some really great work. So welcome, Sheri, to the call.
Thank you, Kathleen. Congratulations on your podcast.
Thank you for inspiring me. So today, tell me what myth you brought to the radio show that you'd like to bust wide open.
Money has to be a struggle.
Even how you say that, money has to be a struggle.
Money has to be a struggle.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about why you picked that myth.
Because I want to bust it wide open. Because, Kathleen, it's something that I am looking at right now, and looking specifically at my relationship with money. And all the stories we tell ourselves around money, and so I'm really just going, why do I sometimes run into this money has to be a struggle thing?
Now, I'm wondering, because it's a common myth that people have, that either there'll always be enough or there'll never be enough, and yours is a little twist on that in terms of a struggle. I'm wondering if you can tell me a little bit about where you think that might have come from and how it either helps you or gets in the way, either as an entrepreneur or in your personal life.
Well, I'll tell you that I have this belief, or that money is abundant, and I think that's not necessarily the term, but I believe that I am completely capable of taking care of myself and making money. I know that very much, but every once in a while I run into this like smack my head crack, on struggle with money. And so I've been thinking an awful lot about what that is. I think the other thing, my father recently passed away, and I have been looking an awful lot about where my dad was and where he was in his life and whatever, and kind of some of the stories that I believe that I inherited from my dad. And I think sometimes the story about money having to be a struggle I inherited from my dad,
So in some ways, first of all, I'm sad to hear that you lost your father, and I know this is a time of reflection, but it may be that you are thinking about that myth in order to honor him in some way. It may be a way of connecting with him during this transitional time in your life. What are your thoughts about that?
I think it's a little bit. I mean, I think that, whenever any kind of big thing like that particular happens, and then you kind of compound it with the first of the year. And
yes,
then, as a business owner, you're like, okay, here's the budget for the year.
Is that why I'm having panic attacks?
All of a sudden, everything is back to zero again. Instead of like this rolling kind of thing where you're like rolling years, all of a sudden everything's back to zero again. So possibly that could be it, right?
Yeah, so it can be a variety. I mean, I think what you're highlighting is so important is that when we're really exploring, okay, right now I'm really paying attention to this money script, or that happens to be a myth that money has to be a struggle, to really take a step back and think about what are the things that may be triggering that to kick in, because it sounds like for you it's not always the case, but right now it is. So maybe the first of the year, the loss of your father, other things could be contributing. But let's start with something that's counterintuitive. How do you think the myth, money is a struggle, actually helps you personally or professionally?
Oh boy. So, Kathleen, I was a single mom for a very long time. And in fact, it was interesting because I was lining up some guests for a podcast, and I was thinking to myself about the fact that I went to work when my son was 4 weeks old.
Wow.
I had no choice, and that's not necessarily true. I chose to go back to work when Garrett was 4 weeks old, as opposed to opting into welfare and whatnot. I chose that. And the responsibility at a very young age, 24, of taking care of a little person really drove me to just be focused and, work and work and work and, really kind of reach and reach and reach. So that was a very good driver for me.
Okay, so money is a struggle can actually drive you to get things done.
Indeed. So and it sure has, because
yep.
I'll tell you, I've been on the phone. Hello. Calling people. Hello, how about that project?
Yeah, so even now it really drives you. So that's the upside. But, you brought this myth to the call and you want to bust it wide open. So what's the downside? How does it get in the way?
Well, here's how it gets in the way for me. It saps my energy. It keeps me up at night. It feels heavy.
Yeah, struggle feels heavy. Mm-hmm, yep. Mm-hmm. So what would you like it to be, whether it's true for you now or not? If you could say to somebody else, often it's easier to say to a friend or a client or, even a son or daughter, to kind of help them. If they came to you and they said, you know what, money is a real struggle, and you were coaching them to think about it differently, how might you coach them? What would you say to them to help them kind of reframe that and bust through that myth?
Money is a game.
Interesting. Oh, and you giggle. That's interesting. So you go from money is a struggle and you're heavy to money is a game and you giggle. So what is life like when you think of money as a game?
Well, it very much is. It's understanding the rules of the game and how to play the game, and being very aware of the game. And even if you think about, like, as an example, even Monopoly, right? In the Monopoly world, when you're playing Monopoly, the money is funny money. But you know exactly how much money you have, right? And you know where what real estate you can buy or not buy, or what you can do, right?
Yes.
And I think that looking at it from that particular perspective of understanding how much you have, and then playing that game, I think it just would help people get a little less freaked out and a little more feeling in control.
Mm-hmm. And have you heard of the financial literacy expert that actually had his kids, their early adolescent children, actually played Monopoly with real money one weekend, and he brought home the money in the denominations that are actually in the Monopoly game?
Oh man, that's awesome. No.
Yeah, so he does a TED Talk. I'm blanking on his name. Hopefully when I put up this podcast, I'll put up a link to this TED Talk that he did. But basically what he did is he really tapped into what his kids' money personalities were and how they played. Some of them played differently when it was funny money versus some of them played just the same, whether it was funny money or real money. But I think what you're highlighting is the idea that, we have a perspective about money, and it can get serious and it can get heavy and it can feel yucky, and it sounds like it zaps your energy and, dare I say, your creativity, because you're a very creative person. But when you think about it as a game, it becomes a little bit more fun. So how do you think it would be if you decided, you know what, for the next 24 hours. I'm going to make it small just because I want to make it doable. For the next 24 hours, you said, you know what? I'm going to treat money as a game and see what that feels like.
Oh, well, I think that would just be a fantastic idea,
So what would
right?
change? What would change in terms of your viewpoint?
Well, so for me, one of the things, Kathleen, that I always laugh because balancing my checkbook, I just hold it up to my forehead. Remember Johnny Carson would hold up an envelope? Remember that?
Yes, absolutely.
So most of the time I joke about how I balance my checkbook, that I just hold it up to my forehead and go, okay, I have enough, right?
Yeah.
But possibly if I treated money like a game, I might really sit down and go, all right, how much is there really? What are my commitments? What real estate do I need to buy or not buy? And I think I might not go into it with such trepidation. I don't think I would be as, yeah, I don't think I would be as heavy and dark and depressed.
Well, there's a levity to it, and it sounds like it's more of a figuring it out as opposed to being weighed down by it. One of the things that came to mind for me when you were talking about the new year and being an entrepreneur, and I think, folks out there, whether they have a financial service practice or whether they are an entrepreneur or maybe have been in a business in the past, there is a way in which all of a sudden, all this success that you experienced last year, as of January 1st, kind of gets mentally reset. And what's
Mm-hmm.
interesting is it really hasn't gone anywhere. It's just some arbitrary number that that somebody decided was the fiscal year or the, typical fiscal year. And we reset it. So I guess the other thing that I'm thinking about in terms of busting this myth wide open is deciding, you know what, I'm not going to fall victim to what's called mental accounting, which is putting arbitrary money in arbitrary buckets and saying, oh, that's last year's and that's this year's. That success can be ongoing and flowing. And that can be part of the game of let's see how successful we can be this year. And let's not forget that, to use the monopoly analogy, that you had a lot of real estate last year and you will have a lot this year.
Mm-hmm. And I have been telling myself that as well. And I think that going back and like looking at like last quarter or the last 6 months and going, all right, what's been sales success, right? What's been sales success then? And then, how does this roll into sales success for first quarter? I think that definitely would be a really another way to get out of this hilarious, bleak January 1st, everything goes down to zero number.
Mm. Well, and I'm wondering, does your dad have any other money scripts, money thoughts or beliefs that he passed on that might serve you better right now so you can honor him this way and still hold on to a money belief that serves you?
I'll have to think about that a little bit. I've been thinking about it because, Kathleen, like you, I've kind of been thinking about what are the stories we tell ourselves around money. It just is continuing to kind of, and I remember talking to one of my business coaches at one time. She's like, money is karma, Sheri. That's all it is. It's energy. It's exchange for energy.
Well, what's interesting is as you're saying this, I'm realizing that in some ways I'm honoring the myth money is a struggle in a slight way in my life in the past week. And so I'm about to head off on vacation. It's a great vacation. We're celebrating my husband's 50th. So, we spent a decent amount of money on it. I am getting my shower redone. I'm looking at another vacation with girlfriends in May. And so money is outgoing, but then all of a sudden I thought I kind of panicked and pulled back. And in some ways, I think also am honoring my family history that somehow it's not supposed to be so easy. So I, would encourage listeners as well as I myself am going to try to embrace that idea of, okay, so if money was not a struggle and it was more of a game, that sometimes in a game, sometimes you struggle, but you push through it. What would that be like? And I think I'd be a little less anxious about all of the spending. Not to say I'm not going to be responsible, but a little bit less anxious about it.
Exactly. Exactly. I have been thinking an awful lot about that. And there's, one word that has two meanings, right? Fearless
Mm-hmm.
and fearless.
Look at you. Tricky.
Right. Yeah. And I've been thinking about both of those because when you're in sales or an entrepreneur, you need to be fearless.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of associated with this pullback stuff, you need to fear less.
Well, the other thing that strikes me is if you've been in business 3 years, you're at that tipping point where it's push. When you get anxious, you need to push through it, because
Mm-hmm.
when you start to feel that feeling, whatever it is that's keeping you up at night, it means good things and great things are about to happen. And so it's that tipping point. So in some ways, I can kind of get excited for you, even though I know it's hard to be living with that. The idea that money is a struggle. So if somebody's listening to the call right now, what advice would you give them if they identify with your myth of money as a struggle?
Well, I think that it's great to kind of figure out where that idea came from, because we obviously learn things. So it could either be with experiences or family history or whatever it is, or what people, how they demonstrated things, what you get to watch go on in your life. So I think that that's been helpful for me to kind of go, I know where part of this came from, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's been really helpful for me, kind of around that whole fearless piece of my puzzle. And, and then I just continue to try to go, okay, and what is that? What is the, and, and then, acting,
Oh, improv.
improv,
It's not and but, because that's not what you're supposed to do.
it's yes,
Oh, it's
and
yes
yes,
and. It's yes and.
yes, and.
Okay.
I'm going yes, and. Yes, and. Yes, and. That's what
Excellent.
I'm doing.
So looking to your money history, which I think is really important for people to do because it's can be eye opening and actually really helpful. And second, to kind of embrace life like an improvisational play, which in some ways it is, isn't it? Where it's yes and going to the next thing. Um, I love the thought of thinking about money as a game, so I'm going to try that on for size. And having you here and being so honest and open about it has been really helpful, Sheri. I think you're really role modeling to people and entrepreneurs that we can be successful and still have these times where there's some ebb and flow in what we're thinking about money. And in fact, that's more normal than not. So I really appreciate you coming in and working to bust this myth wide open and being able to start to see what are the other ways you could start looking at money as you move forward in this new year.
Well, and I love this concept of your podcast, and I am regularly kind of thinking about these things. And so I just think it's fantastic that you're taking this on, because wow, do we have a lot of crap around money and money myths, right?
Yes. And
So I figure I'm just going to start you off on the right foot with somebody who's like, yeah, see my dark side, see my light
excellent.
side.
Well, I don't see it as dark. I see it as honest and genuine, which I love in people, which is why I'm sure we connected. I want to let listeners know how they can find out more about you and what you're up to, and if there's anything special going on you want to let them know about.
You can find me at shoefitts.com, which is like your shoe fits with two T's. That's where it came from. SHOEFITTS, shoefitts.com. And, or on Twitter at Miss Fitts, MISSFITTS, the best Twitter handle in the world. It goes very well with me. And, I am really, what I'm pushing for this year, Kathleen, is speaking. I love to speak. I love to teach. So if folks are interested in learning a little bit more about what I speak about, marketing and branding and social media and how it all intersects in the world of financial services.
Which is such a hot topic. And I have to tell everybody out there that Sheri has won a variety of awards in speaking and is an excellent speaker. So definitely take her up on that offer. Thanks again, Sheri, for joining us today. And thank you to everybody out there for listening to Breaking Money Silence. I'm Kathleen Burns Kingsbury, a wealth psychology expert and author dedicated to getting people talking about money matters. For more information about my books, speaking, and services, please visit kbkwealthconnection.com. Until next time, keep the lines of communication open.